Good day once again, students. We return to the topic of the SAT today, but with specific testing strategies. I've actually added an additional category here since my list you saw yesterday. So let's walk through each of these items one by one. First and foremost, you need to prepare your mind and body for taking the SAT. It is an experience, which means you need to start setting up good sleeping habits. Okay? Sleep is possibly the most important thing you can do for your brain, especially as a young, developing adolescent. And the most important aspect of sleep, I'm not sure if you've ever heard this, is actually not the number of hours you sleep, but the regularity with which you get them. Okay? If you frequently stay up late and then think that just sleeping in on Saturday will make up for it, you are sadly mistaken. In fact, it would be better for you to only get 4 hours of sleep each night as long as it is a consistent 4 hours, instead of saying, I've got a little extra time tonight, I'll go for 5. Today I'll go 6. Today I only get 3. It's much better if you can form your schedule to fit a consistent sleeping pattern so that your mind and body get used to that, and your brain will naturally make the best use out of the number of sleep hours that you get it. But you have to give it time to adapt. This means you cannot simply change your sleep habits the day before or even the week before the SAT. You need at least a month of startup time on this. Next, let's talk about fuel. Your brain needs it. You need to eat. This is not a time to skip breakfast. Even if you think, normally I don't eat breakfast on school days, I'll be fine. This is going to tax you like nothing else has before. You're going to be burning calories. Thinking hard burns calories. It really does. And you need those. You need those calories, those simple sugars. I recommend a source of carbs for direct fuel, a source of protein for long-lasting energy. And yeah, you're going to have to use your muscles. The brain is one of them. As well as electrolytes and fluid intake. Okay? Your brain relies on those to operate, okay? Ask your chemistry teacher for more details. But you need water, and you need those simple electrolytes, like in Gatorade, to function. I recommend bringing snacks if none are being provided. And even if they are, maybe bring your own. You will like your own favorite snacks better. That's why they're your favorite. I would also say, if you had to get very specific, right? Get some protein and some carbs in the morning. So peanut butter and toast, or a bagel or something, or eggs and toast, some combination therein. And the night before, or maybe the night before, have some fish. The fattier the fish, the better. Okay? Fish fats are really good for efficient brain chemistry. And then next is going to be your attitude. Believe it or not, you can influence how you perform based on how you think you're going to perform. This has been studied, and you can actually affect your score positively or negatively depending on your attitude going into the test. So even though I am repeating time and time again that it's going to be tough and it's going to be awful, you need to say, I know that going in, but I've practiced and I've prepared, and I'm going to beat this thing despite that. Going with a positive mental attitude will help you succeed. You have to believe that you can beat the test in order for you to beat the test. All right, now let's get more specific. Some focus tricks. You're going to be sitting there for hours on end. Oh my gosh, it gets so boring. You've got to keep your mind on task. So there's two approaches to this, and different ones work for different people. Some of you will work better with the psych up method. It works better to get yourself pumped, right? Especially if you are a sports inclined kind of person. This is the tapping into that adrenaline and saying, no, 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 I can do this. Let's do it. Let's get excited. I'm going to take this. I'm going to beat it. Yes, right? And you get amped up for it. Other people take more of the calming down approach. You breathe deep. You relax. Focus on your breathing. Do some of those meditative techniques to slow your heart rate down, and that's what helps you stay focused, because you've turned inward on your breathing first, and then your mind is calm and can be turned to the test. Which technique you ultimately use, one, the other, or even a combination thereof, depending on the section. If you're like really good at the math but not the English, maybe you use a different technique on different parts of the test. That can work as well. That's going to be up to you. And I'm going to throw this back into why it's important to practice taking the test, because you need to figure out which one of these works for you the best. Now, this is especially true on the reading passages, but your brain takes in an inordinate amount of information at all times. And the only way it can sort through what is actually worth keeping track of is whatever it finds interesting. Okay? I do not find the color of my wall that interesting to stare at. Thus, my brain doesn't keep it cataloged in high detail. However, the Batman picture that I have on top of my wall is absolutely fascinating because I take interest in it, and my brain remembers all of the finer details about it. You need to apply the same method to all of the questions on the test, really, but even more so on the English and reading portions, especially when you have a large reading passage to keep track of. Whether or not you read the passage first and then go to the questions, or read through all the questions quickly first and then go to the passage, is going to be up to you. But either way, when you read through that thing, you have to tell your brain it is the most fascinating thing you have ever read. Okay? You have to pick up that page, look at it, and inside go, oh boy, I would love to read this and know all about celery development. Yes, you have to do that to yourself. Fake the interest, because your brain will know that you're interested, and it will keep track of that information better. Similarly, while we're on the topic of tricking your own brain, reward yourself, okay? Both in large portions and in small portions. Large portions such as when you take those practice tests, when you are done, do something you absolutely love. Reward and treat yourself. Say, good job, brain. You have done well today. You deserve this. Go out for ice cream. Okay? Play some video games. Eat, have dessert. Okay? Have all the dessert. Reward yourself. And then be prepared to do the same thing on the actual test itself. And anytime you get a little bit bogged down, you remind yourself, hey, when I get through this, I get a big fat brownie at the end. It's going to be delicious. Yes, let's get back to the test and get it done. Okay? And you can also break this down into smaller portions and say, I'm going to treat myself mentally at the end of each section, perhaps. Say, okay, when I finish this, I can afford to relax for a few moments and think about something pleasant. Okay? Remember that great time you had playing video games the day before, hanging out with your friends. Reminisce on some good memories or something like that. Something you can do just in your own brain, but that you can do at the end of each section to feel better about it. All right. Now let's talk about the big one, the time crunch. How can you best make use of your time? Well, the biggest things you can do is, one, just know the questions, the material better in order to answer the questions faster. That's not on my list here, but that is the first and foremost, most obvious thing. Just get good. But that doesn't help a lot of people. So here's some more specific things you can do to help yourself save time that can then be put towards actually answering the questions, because that's the most important use of it. First up, practice the bubbling. You will have to use your pencil and fill in the tiny little bubble sheet. You are going to fill in possibly 100 little bubbles with your pencil before you are through. And yes, this is a skill you can practice and get better at. There is, in fact, a scientifically tested and proven best technique for filling in the bubbles, and that is this. You should start with your pencil in the center of the circle and fill outward, okay? Start in the middle and spiral outward. In fact, if you really want to get clever with this, you should bring no fewer than 2 different pencils on the test. One you keep as sharp as possible for actually working out your answers, and one you actually leave pretty dull, because a duller pencil has a wider tip. It leaves a thicker line and thus requires fewer strokes, or in this case, concentric circles, to completely fill in the bubble. These are the secret techniques that the pros use to beat the test. Not that there's literally pros, but you know what I mean. All right, next up, answering a page at a time, then bubbling. Do not get into the habit of stopping to bubble in every single answer as soon as you have it. You are wasting time flipping back and forth from booklet to answer sheet, booklet to answer sheet. Instead, complete all of the questions on that double-sided page of the test booklet, and then turn to the bubble sheet and very carefully, bubble in order. 27, that's A, 28, that's C, right? And go back and forth until you've bubbled in the whole page. This will save you a lot of flipping back and forth, saving you time, and it will also give your brain a slight break from prior questions before finally committing that answer. Okay? And this is important because every once in a while you will catch yourself when you return to viewing the question again after having looked at something else. Your brain will notice, oh, wait, I didn't see that negative sign the first time. Shoot, I better go back and change that. And now you have automatically built in for yourself a double check on every single question. Next up, do not waste your time erasing. If you have to erase something from your bubble sheet, yes, absolutely do it, and do it carefully. But if you make an error in your computation on the test booklet, don't bother erasing it. Cross it out if that's required for you to ignore it, but just move on. Really, you should only be writing down the bare minimum of material you need to keep track of. If you can't hold all 4 values in your brain in order to work through the question completely mentally, jot those down and nothing else. The absolute minimum. The more time you have to write stuff down instead of just manipulating it in your head, the more time you use on that question. And then finally, speaking of saving time per question, become familiar with your calculator. Okay? The better you know the calculator and A, its capabilities, and B, where to find all the frickin' buttons, the more efficient you will be with it. Okay? On the calculator portion of the SAT, it is entirely possible to answer every question correctly and thoroughly without the use of a calculator. However, some questions are way more tedious. Some of them can be answered really fast with the calculator. Basically, you type it in and it's just done, okay? Recognize those things that the calculator is really fast at doing and recognize what it's not fast at doing. If you know your multiplication table, 7 times 8 is, well, it takes longer to press all the buttons on the darn machine than it would be if you just knew that, right? So you have to be able to differentiate. Be familiar with what your calculator is better at doing and know where it is, especially with the TI graphing calculators. There's a lot of, I'll call them hidden features. It's not that they are explicitly hiding from you. It's just that in order to fit them all on the calculator, they ended up buried under menus instead of explicitly on one of the buttons that you can see on the face of the calculator itself. And knowing where those are. For example, did you know that if you press the Math menu button and 3, you will automatically call upon the cubed function? There's already a square button to automatically square a number right on the calculator. But if you need to cube something, you can press Math 3, and that will select the cube, and it'll put a tiny little 3 in the exponent, instead of you having to press the caret key and then 3. Now, it's the same number of button presses, but it looks a little bit cleaner. And knowing that that is on there can save you time from hunting around for other things sometimes. All right, now let's get to the extra fancy stuff. Manipulating the multiple choice, or should I say exploiting the multiple choice, because as we all know, multiple choice questions are always the easiest. You don't actually have to recall the information yourself. You have some prompts already given to you. You just need to figure out which one is the correct one. So first and foremost, because it is a multiple choice, the absolute #1 piece of advice I give everybody on every test is don't leave anything blank. Cannot believe the number of students who just skip questions and don't provide an answer. You have a 1 in, usually there's actually 5 choices, so a 1 in 5 chance. That's 20% chance of getting a free answer to a question you otherwise didn't know. And believe it or not, as of 2016 now, there is no penalty for a wrong answer on the SAT. They are practically begging you to guess, okay? If all else fails, make a guess, put something in there. Now, you can, of course, make a better than complete random guess. You can use the process of elimination, right? You can do some of the work in the question to at least narrow it down. Say like, okay, I'm not sure how to finish this, but I know enough to know the answer should be even, right? Perhaps you can work that out. And then again, eliminate some of those answers that just don't fit the bill. And then you're down to like 1 in 3, maybe a 1 in 2 chance of guessing correctly. That's pretty good. You should also get in the habit of reading the entire question and its answers briefly before doing any work, okay? Because this will give you a big fat hint as to what kind of process you might need to use in order to answer it. Let's draw on some math. Quadratic equations, okay? If you haven't solved them yet, you will be having to do so next year. Solving quadratic equations is absolutely on the SAT, and you have to know what types of solutions are going to be expected. If you can glance at the list of possible answers and see, they are just looking for one answer. Every single answer says x equals number, x equals number. Or do the answer set contain 2 numbers, x equals 3, 5, x equals -1, +1, right? Are they looking for both solutions to this list, right? That you can get out of reading the question carefully, it should have specified, but also from checking the answers. Another thing that wouldn't be stated explicitly in the question is what kind of solutions. Are they all real, or are they including complex? Because if you know that ahead of time, if you know, looking at the possible answers, that it has some complex numbers listed, then you might change your approach. You know you're not going to be able to factor it. You're going to have to use the quadratic formula, and you might just want to go ahead and do it by hand unless your calculator is set up to solve for complex solutions with the quadratic formula. Okay? That's the kind of information you will get out of reading just the answers as well as the question. And then finally, the very best secret technique to the multiple choice. When you don't know the answer, you can do better than guess. You can make use of what I call the law of the most common. And this comes from the structure of the SAT answers. Remember, they were designed to trick you. They took all of the most common errors and made those as separate answer selections apart from the correct answer. However, what they typically do not do is combine multiple errors at once. So what you'll frequently see on the list of possible answers is one of them will be correct, and then every other answer will be one iteration away from that. Okay? Imagine, if you will, the answer is in the form of a linear equation, y equals mx plus b. What you will find is that one of the answers is correct, and many of them share the same slope listed. Say the slope is 3. And you'll see 3 out of the 5 answers all have a slope of 3. The other 2 have a slope of 5. And then you'll notice the y-intercept. 3 out of the questions all have a y-intercept of 5, and the other 2 have a y-intercept of 3. So clearly, the mistake here has been swapping those numbers around. But notice which is the most common. Most of the answers have the slope of 3. Without even reading the question or knowing anything about it, I can tell you it is most likely, not guaranteed, but most likely that the correct answer has a slope of 3 and a y-intercept of 5, because each of those positions is the most commonly placed in the rest of the answers. And if I was set up with some more visual aids, I would point out some examples for you, but I did not have time to put that together for this video. In fact, speaking of time, I have not used mine very efficiently, and I think we've gone on long enough. I invite you now to practice some of these test-taking strategies, not on taking a test itself, but a test about the strategies. A quiz has been provided for you about SAT test-taking strategies, and they will cover many more than I have mentioned here. So if you're not familiar with them, run through it. Maybe you don't get the question right, but the point is to go back later and find out what that correct use of the strategy really is. And that will be how you learn it. All right, that's all from me for today. Thank you very much for listening to this now rather long video. So long, farewell, enjoy the rest of your day.